Breaking right now on Denver 7 News at 6. Russian troops close in on Ukraine's capital.
We know that there were hit lists, so they can go in and just assassinate people.
Tragic new video this morning shows missiles into homes and apartment buildings destroyed.
This morning, the action U.S. and world leaders will take today, hoping to force a Russian retreat.
Plus, Ukrainians here in Colorado speak out, terrified for their loved ones back home.
The country where I was born, when I was raised up, where my family live, for me that's unbelievable.
And our thoughts are with so many Colorado families and, of course, the people of Ukraine. In less than an hour, we know President Biden will meet with other NATO leaders to discuss the coordinated response. Right now, it's largely been limited to helping refugees like the ones in this video streaming into Moldova. About 100,000 Ukrainians have fled their homes in just the last day or two. Yeah. I'm Nicole Brady. Thanks for staying with us this morning.
And I'm Brian Sanders. Just incredible images we're seeing here. Later today, though, the United Nations Security Council will meet and collectively condemn Russia's actions. It's likely to have little effect. Russian troops are expected to take control of Ukraine's capital of Kyiv in a matter of days or even sooner. Such an eerie sight and a stark contrast from yesterday. It is the middle of the afternoon in Kyiv as we take a live look at the city. Very few vehicles or people walking around, and the Russian troops continue to make advances and surround the city.
We'll have complete coverage just ahead explaining the impacts for Europe and here on us in the U.S. But first, it is Friday and we want to get you out the door with a look at your forecast, because we're finally seeing a warm up, Katie.
Good morning, you guys. Yes, today it is one more very chilly afternoon ahead of much warmer weather for the weekend. Satellite and radar showing mostly clear skies over the I-25 corridor and east. We will pick up a little light mountain snow, weak system rolling across the state. Temperatures are still very cold out this morning. It is only 5 degrees. Aurora, Boulder, Broomfield, up into Fort Collins, -2 right now in Greeley, and 8 below zero over Sterling, and wind chill values feeling even colder. So be prepared, bundle up. We'll stay in the single digits into 7 o'clock. By 9, 12, 11 will be right around 20 degrees and daytime highs still below freezing. Upper 20s to right around 30 from Denver down through Colorado Springs. An afternoon of teens and 20s into the mountains. We'll talk more about these snow totals we're expecting out to the west and here across the plains coming up in just a few, Jason.
And we will have more melting over this weekend. We will get those neighborhoods all cleared out. Right now, the major roads look pretty dry for us, whether it's Highway 36 down across I-25 to the north side of town. This is 225 from Yosemite on down to this crash. You can see the flashing lights. It's coming from southbound 225 to exit right there at I-25. Take a look from the map down there, and there is some slight slowing right here at that junction. Not worth an alternate route right now. You can get by it. It's just one car into the wall, and they do have part of the lane blocked, but I'm not seeing more than maybe a 1-minute delay on 225. The rest of the drive looks fine with speeds for the most part in the 50s, 60s. I'm still seeing some 70s out there. 225 is getting a little bit busier, but for the most part, it's a much better drive today than it has been on any of the days this week.
Returning to the breaking news, as Russia inches its way into the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, people there are hearing large explosions, and there are reports of intense gunfire just a few miles north of the center of the city.
A lot of people hiding underground right now. The Ukrainian military says it has distributed 18,000 rifles to volunteers in the capital city, civilians who want to fight back. 137 Ukrainians have died in the fighting so far. More than 300 have been injured. The UK is also reporting hundreds of Russian casualties. But take a look at the map here. It shows the areas where the Pentagon says Russian forces have launched more than 100 missiles and initiated multiple ground attacks. Many of those missiles are raining down on neighborhoods. At least 8 people were injured today after a rocket hit an apartment complex in a suburb of Kyiv, and this picture was taken of an unexploded rocket caught in a ceiling. Truly images we haven't seen since World War II.
In a video message, Ukraine's president said Russia has designated him target number 1 and his family is number 2. He is still in the capital city, though, of Kyiv. Overnight, Ukraine's military says it killed a group of Russian-backed separatists who had entered the city. And this video here shows abandoned Ukrainian tanks. This is near a bridge crossing into Russian-held areas in southern Ukraine. Russia claims it disabled 118 Ukrainian military facilities.
So as a result of the assault, Russia now faces more sanctions from countries all over the world, including the U.S.
President Biden ordered a freeze on more Russian banks and cut off Russia's industries and military of the U.S. technology. We're joined now by CSU political science professor Dr. Peter Harris, who focuses on international security and foreign policy. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Harris, this morning. We want to get right to it. Do you expect the sanctions to have any impact?
Good morning. They will have an impact. They will have some bite in Russia. They will affect Russians' daily lives and their economy, for sure. But whether they'll have an impact on President Putin's decision-making calculus, I don't think so. The sanctions they didn't stop the war, the threat of sanctions, and the imposition of sanctions won't stop the war either. The only thing that would stop Vladimir Putin is him achieving his objectives in Ukraine. So really, that's what we're waiting for now, is him to impose a military solution on the country.
And Dr. Harris, as we've seen, NATO's hands are tied a little bit militarily. I mean, Ukraine was being considered to join NATO, but right now those 30 member countries have decided not to get involved militarily, including the U.S. How can they respond to help Ukraine at this time?
That's right. A military intervention in Ukraine is really not feasible. Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, so to fight Russia is to risk provoking a nuclear war. Putin knows that, and that's why he feels confident in invading Ukraine in the way that he's done it. And it's also why he doesn't want Ukraine in NATO, because the United States has got nuclear weapons, and he wouldn't want to provoke a nuclear war with the United States. NATO's only recourse is to try and secure its borders. There's a potential to help arm an insurgency in Ukraine against the Russian invaders. But even that, I think, will make some NATO members nervous in the sense that they do not wish to provoke a larger war with a nuclear-armed state.
Well, we've heard, of course, concerns that Ukraine may not be the end game here, that the Baltic states could be next on Putin's list. What are your thoughts on that? Are they right to be worried?
I think they're right to be worried. What we're witnessing in Ukraine is unprecedented. A nation state attacking another nation state in Europe, essentially trying to bring down its government, and what looks like a play for the conquest of Ukraine. So that certainly right to be worried. I would be too. I would doubt that Putin would consider a conventional attack on any NATO member, though. I mean, to risk triggering Article 5 and an attack on one NATO member being an attack on all NATO members is unlikely from my perspective.
What is the end game here of Vladimir Putin? Is it simply to regain control of Ukraine and offer more of a buffer from Western ideology? I mean, it really feels like we're slipping back decades into a more Soviet era.
I don't think the end game is Ukraine. I think you have to look to the list of demands that Russia gave NATO back in December. He wanted NATO forces to pull back to 1997 deployments, which means out of the Baltics, out of Poland, all the way back to Germany. We wouldn't give him that last week. We wouldn't give him it a month ago. We wouldn't give him it last year. I think he wants to make the people of Ukraine suffer so badly that leaders in the West come back to the negotiating table with the blood drained from their faces. He wants to make Ukraine hurt so badly that President Biden, President Macron, others are forced to come back to him and give him the bigger items that he wants in terms of a new security order for Europe.
Of course, with the sanctions, we're trying to make it more painful for Putin and Russia before they can make it more painful in Ukraine. I mean, is that going to happen, do you think?
Sanctions hurt, but they don't hurt as much as bombs and rockets. So the people of Ukraine are going to suffer very badly. There'll be a lot of refugees. There'll be death. I expect the government will surrender or it will be replaced. So Putin knows that he can inflict much more pain on Ukrainians than we can inflict on Russians' pocketbooks. He knows that we care about Ukraine, even though it's not a NATO member. He knows that people like President Biden care deeply about the plight of Ukrainians. He's a cruel man, and he knows that he can hurt those people so badly that we may come back to the negotiating table and offer him more than we did a week ago.
And you have to assume that he weighed the consequences. He knew sanctions would be coming. He weighed the consequences of invading Ukraine versus those sanctions before he invaded. Dr. Peter Harris, we certainly appreciate your time and insight this morning.
Thank you.
You know, every leader is doing what they can. Governor Polis announced actions from our state against Russia. He has directed his office to terminate any state contract with a Russian state-owned company. He's also asking the state's Information Technology Office to focus resources on protecting our state from a possible cyber attack. The governor says Colorado is also ready to welcome refugees from Ukraine, and the state is prepared to provide Ukraine with any possible support.
Also, the invasion could take a toll on prices here at home, from gas to food, even metals. Russia is an oil and gas powerhouse, especially for Europe, and more sanctions will impact the output.
It's the instability of where are you going to get that product from. For example, Russia produces about 10% of the oil that the world uses, and they produce about 30% of the natural gas that Europe uses. So when you begin to see instability over there, it creates problems throughout the marketplace. Those prices then rise, and we end up having to pay more at the pump and more to heat our homes.
Well, the good news is Colorado is one of the top 10 oil producers in the U.S., so we won't see the same kind of price spikes as some other states. AAA says the price of gas in Colorado is only up a penny so far from overnight.
Of course, it's not just gas prices. Other things we buy may cost more soon. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack said Thursday it's too early to predict how much food prices could be affected, but we can tell you prices of wheat, corn, and soybeans all surged yesterday. Russia is the world's largest wheat exporter. I spoke to Jack Buffington, the director of the Supply Chain Management Program at the University of Denver. He said it's not so much supply this time, but uncertainty that will drive prices up.
How disruptive will this be? Is this something that's going to last for 2 weeks, or is it something that's going to last for 2 months? And all the markets are trying to think through what's happening and predict this, and that's what you're seeing from the price increases.
Another impact could be on the cost of fertilizer. Russia is a major exporter of all types, and farmers could soon see higher costs, in turn raising food prices even more.
So we will continue to follow any new developments that come out of Ukraine and, of course, the impacts here at home. You can watch Denver 7 News anytime by downloading the free Denver 7 Plus app to your streaming device.
Pushing to make a popular Denver spot more safe, the dozens of arrests police just made around Union Station.
Plus, the cost of rent in Colorado has crossed a potentially dangerous threshold.